Hello and welcome back to the X-Perts, your exceptional guide to all things X-Men. I am Jeremy.
I'm Joanna.
And I am Jesse.
We are doing this show in conjunction with Second Union. For more of the latest headlines and entertainment, please go to our website at wearesecondunion.com. And this is going to be an interesting episode of the X-Perts because we're doing another deep dive into a character's history. And being that we are the X-Perts and we focus on Marvel's mutants, we decided that for the first time we should do a villain, and it was unanimous which one we were going to do. Everybody wants to talk about Mystique. Everyone wants to talk about the blue shapeshifter that is not just well known because of the movies, but she has been an X-Men villain longer than most people can remember. I mean, what were your first memories of Mystique, each of you?
The 90s cartoon version of her?
Probably that, which is not very well informed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, my first image of her was actually, I don't want to say a mistake, I just came into her at the wrong place, because the first time I saw the character, she was leading Freedom Force. My earliest X-Men comic books the X-Men were in the Outback. This was post-Fall of the Mutants when they couldn't be recorded by electronic devices. Everyone thought the X-Men were dead. X-Factor was like the public mutant team at the time. And this was during the period where Mystique and the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants were co-opted by the U.S. government and turned into like their personal soldiers. So one of the times Freedom Force was up against X-Factor, that was the first time I'd ever laid eyes on Mystique. And I gotta admit, when I was a kid, I wasn't altogether impressed. I mean, it's a character that can change their shape and their visage. That's not one of those powers that captures the imagination of an overactive kid.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it captured mine because I always felt that society wanted women to blend in.
Mm-hmm.
And I always thought that the shape-shifting ability would be like, oh, hey,
yeah,
I'm not this, like, crazy tall person after all. I'm this average size height person. I don't know.
Yeah, and for those that don't know, Mystique's base form is like a short red bob of hair, but her skin is blue, her eyes are all yellow. And just about everything about her design, from your first impression, screams villain. Now, believe it or not, she wasn't designed to be any character in Marvel Comics. She was originally designed by Dave Cockrum, one of the guys responsible for Giant Size X-Men #1 and the visuals of a lot of mutants we know today as X-Men.
Mm-hmm.
The thing was, though, he didn't design her as a character. He just liked designing, as Chris Claremont explained it, sexy women. And he would make sketches and he would put them up, and Claremont saw one of his sketches, looked at that and said, "Can I use that in a comic?" And that became Mystique.
Wow. That's strangely mundane.
Isn't it, though? And she was originally used in Miss Marvel #16 back in May of 1978, which means Mystique is technically 1 year younger than I am.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and Mystique was not an X-Men villain at the time. She was a Carol Danvers villain. Miss Marvel was not Kamala Khan. Miss Marvel was Carol Danvers.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, she was Carol Danvers' arch nemesis for quite a while. As a matter of fact, Claremont said that in the history he was building around this sketch, he originally intended for Mystique and Destiny to be the biological parents of Nightcrawler.
Okay, I can see that.
Well, yeah, in his mind, he thought Mystique had morphed into a male body for the act of conception, but at the time, Marvel didn't agree to that origin because the Comics Code Authority, which at the time was safeguarding the images inside and making sure that they didn't go too far into like body or violent means, they prohibited the explicit portrayal of any gay or bisexual characters. You got to remember, this is the 70s in America.
Okay, but she's a shapeshifter. She wouldn't be actually transgendered necessarily. She'd be shapeshifting. Does that still count to them?
It would, because it would be two characters who at that time were female, even though one was physically portrayed as male, having a gay/bisexual relationship. And, you know, in 1970s America, that was a 4-letter word.
Oh no, clutch your pearls.
It was the 70s. That was like the vast majority of people at the time, unfortunately. But Mystique's exact age is unknown. She's been portrayed as being a couple hundred years old. Her earliest meeting with Destiny, who even in modern Marvel Comics is pretty much identified as her one soulmate, occurred somewhere around the dawn of the 20th century.
Oh.
Wow.
Her earliest known history, while she was pretending to be human as Raven, she adopts the identity of a dead German secret agent named Lenny Zauber. And Lenny and an American that she met named Victor Creed had been assigned with the assassination of a scientist in East Berlin. You know who Victor Creed is?
I know who Victor Creed is.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sabretooth, the longtime Wolverine villain, who is probably about as old as Mystique, really. But
not older, maybe.
Yeah, but Mystique completes the mission in place of Lenny Zauber, and then she and Victor hide in a safe location for a while, and while they were hiding, things got physical, as they tend to do in most action movies.
Mm-hmm.
But after they became lovers, Mystique, who's still masquerading as Lenny, faked her death in order to leave him behind. But the short-lived affair between the two of them results in the birth of another Marvel character known as Graydon Creed.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Graydon Creed is not a mutant of any sort. He's a human.
Mm-hmm.
He never developed an active mutant gene. And according to the stories that Marvel put out in the 90s, not long after Graydon's birth, she gave him up for adoption. Certain stories have Mystique as watching him from a distance, others don't. So it's one of those inconsistencies that happens between writers and editorials. Raven supposedly keeps track of his activities until he reaches adolescence. And because Graydon never turned out to be a mutant, she's disappointed and just completely abandoned him. This caused Graydon to grow up as an adult eventually to hate his parents and therefore all mutants. He actually becomes the leader of an anti-mutant organization known as the Friends of Humanity, one of those pseudo-religious far-right organizations that specifically hates mutants. And while he's a member of the Friends of Humanity, he became a politician too. At the height of his power as a politician, during a speech, he's assassinated by an unknown person. Later, it's discovered that the person that shot Graydon was a time-traveling version of Mystique.
X-Men, time travel. What else is new?
They use that as a cop-out a lot.
Pretty much. It's some kind of complicated storyline that involved Jean Grey, Iceman, Toad, and Juggernaut. I gotta admit, I didn't pay much attention to the storyline because I never found Graydon Creed terribly compelling as a character. But one of the other times she was in her Raven persona, Mystique married a German noble named Baron Christian Wagner. Other comic books give the Count's name as Eric Wagner. Either way, he's an affluent German noble. He's a pretty nice husband, but he's not the best lover, and he's infertile. So, because of this, Mystique uses her shape-shifting abilities to have affairs with other individuals. And one of these individuals turns out to be another mutant named Azazel. Azazel says that he's the ruler of an island nation off the coast of Bermuda known as La Isla de Demones. Otherwise known as the Island of Demons.
Right, yeah. Real original.
Well, yeah, supposedly Azazel is a member of a specific bloodline of mutants that all look very much like him.
Right.
It's one of those storylines that I think comic books or Marvel Comics tends to acknowledge yet ignore as much as possible because it doesn't have the most original tack to anything really going on in it.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
But Azazel is also functionally immortal and the father of this race of mutants known as the Neophem, and he's been around since at least 2000 BC. Well, the Neophem have been anyway. And because of her tryst with Azazel, she becomes pregnant, but her husband becomes suspicious and then asks for a blood test to verify whether or not the child is his. And after the request for a blood test is when Mystique panics and stabs the German noble. And then she hastily buries him. While people are looking for the noble, she gives birth to a baby that comes out, unlike most other mutants, already very apparently a mutant. Comes out with a wrong number of fingers and toes, a tail, and short blue fur all over his body.
Wonder who that could be.
Yeah, well, the locals consider the mother to be cursed. Not a mutant. Remember, this is a long time ago in Germany. Cursed, and attempts to kill them. Mystique escapes, but abandons her son in the process, and that boy is raised by a gypsy sorceress, and eventually becomes Kurt Wagner, a.k.a. the Nightcrawler. So, flash forward even further, and Mystique becomes the adoptive mother of a 4-year-old girl named Anna. This is the character that will eventually become Rogue in the comic books. Now, keep in mind, at this point, Mystique still probably doesn't have a full understanding of what she is. And the word mutant really isn't widely known in Marvel Comics at this point. Rogue had run away from her own home in Caldecott County, Mississippi, and the girl was living alone in a wooded area, brandishing a shotgun and wasn't trusting anybody. You can almost hear the banjo music.
Yep.
But Mystique finds her, and Destiny foresees that Rogue will be important to the both of them. So Mystique finds her, gets her trust, and gets the girl to agree to go with them. And she and Destiny raise the girls as parents. And Mystique becomes very protective of Anna. So Mystique at this time is still running her Black Ops. She has a long-term cover as Raven Darkholme, and she rises through the ranks of United States Civil Service to become the Deputy Director of the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA, in the United States Department of Defense. I did not know Mystique ever went that deep cover in a government organization before.
She's more than capable of doing it, apparently.
Oh, yeah. It got her access to military secrets and advanced weaponry. She used them for both criminal purposes and sold certain things if necessary. She actually attempts the theft of Centurion power armor weaponry from S.H.I.E.L.D.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it's at this point that Destiny has one of her foresights. Now, I'd never really explained for people that don't know. Destiny is a precog. She can see the future and possible timelines, but it's always hard for her to parse out what's going to come to be, because she sees multiple possible outcomes at the same time. One of the things she saw was that the superhero, Carol Danvers, Miss Marvel, was going to be a danger to Rogue. So Mystique spent time spying on Carol Danvers and Miss Marvel for some time prior to beating Carol Danvers' lover, Michael Barnett, to death.
Oh.
And Mystique planned to kill Miss Marvel. So at this time, to help in her criminal activities as well to keep her cover, she arranged for a new version of Magneto's Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Except there's no Magneto. She recruits Avalanche, the Blob, Destiny, and the original Pyro, Sinjin Allardyce, the guy that's in the Marauders right now.
Mm-hmm.
This version of the Brotherhood tries to assassinate a senator in Marvel Comics, Robert Kelly, and this guy has been around for a while, notably anti-mutant.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
They're stopped by the X-Men. And believe it or not, the entirety of this version of the Brotherhood is arrested.
Really?
Yes. Now, not long after this, they managed to escape. But Rogue is continuously being trained by Mystique and Destiny and eventually becomes a member of the Brotherhood herself. She has her classic powers, and it's not the ones everybody knows. It's just the ability to absorb the life force, memories, and potentially powers of anyone she touches, skin-to-skin contact.
Mm-hmm.
So to get the other members of the Brotherhood out, Mystique makes a plan that has Rogue absorb the powers of Miss Marvel and the rest of the Avengers.
Uh-huh.
Ooh.
Now, this plan is initially successful. Rogue does steal all their abilities, but the Avengers fight back and eventually defeat the entirety of the Brotherhood, capturing everybody except for Rogue and Mystique. The problem is, Rogue held on to Carol Danvers so long that she permanently absorbed her memories, personality, and powers.
I remember that part of it.
Yeah. In addition, the Pentagon captures Mystique, and I'm sorry, the Pentagon didn't capture Mystique. The Pentagon received Mystique from Miss Marvel, who managed to capture Mystique without the use of her powers. That must have been humiliating.
A bit.
Yeah, really.
So, the Brotherhood eventually escapes and battles against another character who eventually becomes a mutant, Dazzler. Also doesn't go well. But one of the members of the Brotherhood actually has a bit of a beef with Mystique for being arrested twice and decides on a way to get back at her. This is the part I did not know about prior. You guys know who Jason Wingard is?
No.
Jason
Vaguely.
Wingard is an illusionist known as the Mastermind.
Okay.
Oh!
This is the guy who messed with the psyche of the Phoenix entity and eventually turned it into the Dark Phoenix. He usually projected an image of himself as a handsome man, and he's just kind of weaselly and weird looking underneath.
Yep.
He decided to get back at Mystique for being arrested twice by getting into Rogue's head and kind of bringing the memories of Carol Danvers further to the surface than they ought to be.
Oh boy.
This is what confused Rogue so much that she left the Brotherhood and Mystique without any notification whatsoever. Never said anything, just left. And the weird thing is, because of the way Rogue left, Mystique never thought about Mastermind as being the cause of it. For most of this time, she thinks that Professor X, a psychic, got into Rogue's head and somehow convinced her to leave.
Huh.
So Mystique has a long-term beef with Professor X that is unearned. She and the rest of the Brotherhood launch an attack to kill Professor X that is stopped by Rogue. And Rogue explains to Mystique face-to-face that she joined the X-Men because Professor X, as the world's most powerful mutant telepath, is the only one that seems to have a hope to bring the fragments of her mind back together. And Mystique actually agrees to leave Rogue in their care. So I'm starting I'm starting to understand why why Mystique has such an intense love-hate relationship with the X-Men, because a lot of the worst things about her life pretty much revolve around this team. From here, it's when anti-mutant sentiment rises and the government wants its own anti-mutant program. They call it Project Wide Awake. And Mystique thinks that the times of anti-mutant hysteria make it too difficult for the Brotherhood to operate. So she goes to Dr. Valerie Cooper. She's special assistant to the head of the National Security Council, and offers the services of the Brotherhood to the government in exchange for pardons. This is where Freedom Force starts. So Cooper conveys the offer to the President on the condition that the Brotherhood's first mission is to arrest their former founder, Eric Lensher.
Wow.
Good luck.
Well, it's not just that. This is the period where Eric Lensher was hit by a device created by Moira McTaggart, and it switched his alignment. He's not a mutant propagandist anymore. This is when Professor X is off-world and has left the X-Men in Magneto's care.
Oh, yeah, the flip switch device.
Yes. And so that means that Freedom
Force... good.
Yeah, so that means Freedom Force's first mission is capture Magneto, except Magneto is backed up by the X-Men.
Heck, good luck, buddy.
Again, good luck.
Oh, it did not go well. I mean, this is Freedom Force's first mission, and they were beaten by the X-Men. Except when Magneto finds out that Freedom Force is not just fulfilling a grudge, that they're working on behalf of the government trying to arrest him, he voluntarily surrenders.
Huh.
This leads to a story about the trial of Magneto, which I admit I don't quite know the outcome of, but I can tell you he didn't spend much time in incarceration because of it. Somehow he eventually gets out. I don't know if he was released or forcibly escaped, but either way, he didn't stay there. In the meantime, Mystique continues leading Freedom Force. They had missions of attempting to capture the Avengers on behalf of the federal government. They had a number of run-ins with X-Factor, who at this point is the original 5 X-Men. Specifically, they wanted to arrest Rusty Collins. We talked about that during the Mutant Massacre period. She also fought with the X-Men directly in Dallas, and she was there during the fall of the mutants, when she thought Rogue and the rest of the X-Men died, trying to stop the adversary entity. She also fought Cyclops and Marvel Girl with Freedom Force. They tried again to arrest Rusty Collins, and this put them, instead of against X-Factor, it was against the New Mutants. And it was versus the New Mutants that they finally succeeded in capturing Collins and Skids. Then she leads Freedom Force against the Reavers on Muir Island. This is where things started to get kind of dark, because at this point the X-Men were off-world. There were a few mutants on Muir Island, but not many. This is why the Reavers were attacking. So when Freedom Force goes in to try and stop it, Freedom Force lost 2 members. They lost a mutant strongman and somebody with a high degree of invulnerability, Stonewall, and they lost Destiny. This was a very personal loss for Mystique. It left her close to entirely broken. Matter of fact, this also marked kind of a period where Mystique started to really ramp up her activities versus certain parties. Afterwards, Mystique is nearly killed by Dr. Valerie Cooper, the person who's supposed to be running Freedom Force on the government's behalf, but it's not because Valerie's in her right mind. Dr. Cooper was under the control of Amal Farouk,
Really?
Yeah, the Shadow King entity. After she managed to knock out Cooper, this is when Mystique decided to go into hiding for a while because Freedom Force was breaking down. They had a series of bad missions. But they weren't done yet. However, instead of going down with the ship, she pretty much knocked out Valerie Cooper and took her place. Used her shapeshifting abilities.
Like you do.
Yep. Believe it or not, though, Mystique broke her own cover, saving Professor X's life, because it's at this point that the Shadow King's current host, Jacob Rees, tried to attack Xavier, and for some reason Mystique just intervened. It's also during this period that she reconciles with Rogue for the first time in her life, and comes to terms with Destiny's death. She also teams up with Spiral and Wolverine in stopping Mojo's near destruction of the universe for some reason.
Huh.
She becomes a temporary guest in Xavier's mansion, the Xavier School, but at that point she also has more than a bit of a psychotic breakdown. And she ended up under the care of another mutant who was a part-timer in the X-Mansion, Forge.
Mm-hmm.
The Native American with the ability to invent anything he decides to invent. It's kind of hard to explain, but that's how his powers work. Seriously, if he imagines some type of goal to reach, then suddenly his hands start working faster and he realizes it and he starts putting together devices to reach that goal.
So could he, in theory, build a time machine if that was his goal in his mind? And has he ever done that?
Yes, he's built a number of them. Remember, we talked Bishop stole one of them.
Oh, that was one of... Oh, gotcha. Okay.
And actually, he was tricked into fixing his own mind one time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Cable... Forge was having serious mental problems. He had been under the thrall of a couple different characters as well as had his own mental breakdown, and Cable made Forge think that he was stuck in this gigantic warehouse with this weird marauding force that was running around. And because he was thinking about it as a machine, Forge was thinking about how to stop this entity and shutting certain doors and turning on certain circuits, and it turns out that he was both locking off and fixing the damaged parts of his own psyche because he was perceiving it as a giant machine.
Interesting take.
It was a nice technique. Unfortunately, the series that was born out of it was short-lived. It only lasted about 12 issues.
Oh.
Either way, this leads to Mystique spending several months in Forge's care. Except, she must have broken out because at some point she decided to try to kill Legion, Professor X's son, David Haller.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because one of the things that wasn't terribly obvious at the beginning of that Reaver storyline on Muir Island was that while Destiny died there, she didn't die because of the Reavers. She died because in the chaos on Muir Island, Legion escaped from his containment cell.
Uh-oh.
And he came across Destiny.
Oh.
He was personally responsible for that. It wasn't Legion in his right mind. It was one of his weird personas. But yes, he did that. And Mystique is running around free, but not technically free, because Forge planted something in her skull, and he did it on the orders of the U.S. government to keep track of her. She was forcibly conscripted into the government version of X Factor after being arrested for trying to blow up a dam.
Hmm.
Except she wasn't trying to blow up the dam. She was trying to save it at the time. The government just found her in the middle of all these odd actions and thought she must have been responsible for it. As a matter of fact, Mystique was trying to stop the U.S. government from blowing up the dam because there were certain parties in the government that were going to blame it on mutants and add to the anti-mutant hysteria.
That's dumb.
Not the best.
I mean, I get what was happening, just it's dumb. Oh, they blew it up. Wait, didn't you push the button? No, it was totally the mutants.
Yeah, this story would have been in the early 90s, and storytelling wasn't exactly at its best at this point. Now, this version of X Factor had several characters from X-Men lore that people were aware of. But Mystique was getting along okay with this team, even forcibly conscripted. It got worse when somebody else was added to it, also against their particular will. And his name is Victor Creed.
Oh, wonderful.
Mm.
Yeah, and she remembers having a baby with this man and doesn't want anything to do with him, even though Victor is not entirely sure why Mystique is giving him the cold shoulder. Because remember, he didn't know who that was.
Oh, yeah.
And it turns out Sabretooth wasn't necessarily captured. He's a sleeper agent. he's part of some kind of weird conspiracy that the government's trying to cook up, and he's trying to kill Mystique before she can uncover it because she's the only member of X Factor who's a skeptic. She's the only one who digs into things just because she wants to know truth. And she also starts to develop a strange romantic relationship with the leader of X Factor at this time, Forge.
Of course.
Yeah, he's pretty sure that she's just using him, but it may have been actually legitimate on her part. The conspiracy that Sabretooth is trying to stop Mystique from finding involves Graydon Creed running for president under an anti-mutant platform.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, this is when things kind of get complicated in Mystique's history. Because around the same time, both Graydon Creed and Mystique independently learned that Destiny had married and had children during one of her separations with Mystique. The children are now adults with their own children, and one of those kids, which are, again, grandchildren of Destiny, is a mutant. And for some reason, Graydon Creed has the mutant beaten by members of the Friends of Humanity to warn his mother. It's a warning to his mother to stay away from him. And this is what sends Mystique over the edge to want to murder her own son. I mean, he's trying to have the grandchildren, or one of the grandchildren of her soulmate, beaten to death. But she stops short because she finds out that some of Graydon Creed's backers want him dead, not because they hate him, but because they want an anti-mutant martyr.
She's not going to play by their rules.
Yeah, so she spends a lot of her activity suddenly trying to save him from being killed by members of his own party. She failed. And the death of Graydon Creed brings a new wave of anti-mutant sentiment. So, after Graydon Creed is dead, Sabretooth is activated, and he tries to kill the other members of X Factor as part of Operation Zero Tolerance. This is the storyline that sees Bastion brought to prominence as a new anti-mutant government operative running a line of Sentinels.
Oof, hate Sentinels.
Yeah. Mystique is actually the one who distracted Sabretooth long enough to keep him from murdering X Factor, and then while X Factor is receiving medical treatment, she takes off. She goes into hiding. She takes the identity of a senator's wife, Mallory Brickman.
What?
Yeah, she hid in plain sight.
That's smart.
Oh, it's not just smart. She used the influence of Mallory Brickman's husband, a senator, to set the FBI to hunt down Sabretooth.
Nice.
She also convinces Rogue, while portraying Brickman, to stop from giving up her mutant powers, and she keeps investigating the U.S. government on her own, over Graydon Creed. This also allows her to aid Toad and his more recent version of the Brotherhood of Mutants on a mission to raid a government base. And that mission is foiled thanks to a character known as the Machine Man, who is probably one of the most unfriendly robot heroes I've ever seen in my life. He seriously has a thing against biological entities. He does not like them, yet he keeps fighting to save them. He is one of the most conflicted things I've ever seen in my life. But all it took was Machine Man to force this version of the Brotherhood to run away. And if you don't think he's mean enough to do that, this is a guy that produces buzzsaws from his chest. I'm speaking quite literally. After this, Mystique flees to Europe. She takes the form of a blonde-haired woman, and she's confronted by a famous photographer who wants to make her a fashion model.
Sure.
Oh yeah, that's what she said. She becomes one of the fashion industry's newest top models. Then she uses the money that you get from these modeling gigs, moves back to New York, and buys an expensive penthouse apartment.
Sure?
Oh, yeah, just when you think Mystique may be able to find some kind of balance to her life, she's framed for murder. Of a Japanese diplomat.
I was going to say, but did she actually do it?
No, but it's kind of hard to prove because people swear they saw shapeshifters murder this Japanese diplomat. And the problem is, they did see a shapeshifter kill a Japanese diplomat. Those shapeshifters were Skrulls. And Mystique is the perfect patsy for a bunch of Skrulls. It took a team-up of Mystique convincing Shadowcat and Rogue to help her before her name is cleared.
Wow.
Before Mystique leaves, though, Shadowcat finds something else that becomes a pretty big story for the X-Men for a short period in the 90s. And that's a diary written by Destiny.
Ooh.
It's one of the diaries.
That's right.
Destiny had a series of books where she wrote down a lot of the potential futures that she was seeing as she was seeing them. So they're this jumbled mess of potentialities that somebody could use the books to goose their way to a future they want. So after this, Mystique finally gets critical intelligence on the people who are involved in Graydon Creed's death, and the attempt to kill her using Sabretooth. Oddly enough, it's at this point that Mystique suddenly loses her powers. They just kind of they disappear while she's pretending to be an office worker in a busy workplace, and suddenly she just shifts back to blue. At this point, Mystique is arrested, and the U.S. government acts on intelligence regarding Mystique and destroys all of the alternate identities that she's established over the years. They also confiscated all the money she had hidden away, including in her and Destiny's joint accounts. So between the loss of her powers, all of her IDs, and all of her funds, she started to lash out at everyone around her. And she still didn't have much of a friendly relationship with Rogue, so Rogue had no sympathy. And Rogue even refused to tell Mystique that the X-Men were going to fight the High Evolutionary, who at that point was responsible for depowering all mutants. That's why her powers suddenly shut off.
Gotcha.
The X-Men, who weren't powered themselves at the time, managed to defeat the High Evolutionary, and all the mutants' powers finally kicked back in. And because Mystique was depowered, the government felt comfortable just housing her in a regular jail. I guess they never thought that it was possible she'd ever be able to do what she used to do again.
Big mistake.
Really. It's at this point that she's accidentally sent back in time by X-Factor's sentient ship. Did you guys know that X-Factor had a sentient ship?
Nope.
No.
You want a little aside on what that's about?
Sure.
Believe it or not, it wasn't their ship to begin with. X-Factor got that ship after beating Apocalypse off of it.
Oh.
It was Apocalypse's original headquarters. It was a ship that was able to stealth itself. It used to hang over Manhattan. It was about the size of a skyscraper. Now, I don't mean vertically. I mean, of course, horizontally. But it also had an AI that Apocalypse was suppressing to keep control of this advanced technological ship. Now, if you're asking, where did Apocalypse get this thing from and how could he hide it? He didn't make it. He stole it. The ship was celestial technology.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually, after X-Factor freed it, because nobody was working to suppress it, the AI slowly started to come online. Scared all of them originally, too, when this huge hulking thing starts talking to you. But for a while, yeah, that was X-Factor's home base. Either way, Mystique finds out that she's part of a great time paradox where she finds herself with a time delay weapon and finds out she is the one who assassinated Graydon Creed for some reason. She decides to activate this weird time delay weapon that caused Graydon to die, which further damaged her psyche. And then it got worse when she found out that Destiny was one of the founding members of the anti-mutant conspiracy that Mystique had been fighting against all this time. Mystique had Destiny even withheld medical treatment to mutant children that would have resulted in them not growing up deformed due to their mutations. Destiny was a very self-hating character, it turns out.
Wow, sounds like it.
Actually, the treatment of Destiny in House of X of Moira McTaggart is starting to make a lot more sense.
Mm-hmm.
So, after finding out that her soulmate is responsible for some very horrible things to her own people, Mystique pretty much loses her stuff. She makes another version of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants for an assassination attempt on Senator Kelly, kidnaps Moira McTaggart, and impersonates her to access Moira's research on the Legacy virus.
Oh boy.
The reason why she wants that virus, she's not trying to attack the X-Men. She wants to modify it so it kills humans.
Mm-hmm.
And not mutants.
Right.
Somehow, in the middle of trying to do this, she accidentally developed a cure for the Legacy virus.
Huh. Make people happy.
The assassination attempt on Senator Kelly also does not go well because Pyro betrays his teammates. Pyro himself was infected with Legacy virus.
Right.
That's how he originally died. For those that don't know, Legacy Virus was originally introduced by Strife, the Cable clone. It was a very personal thing he set out against the X-Men and Cable. When it infects somebody, it slowly poisons them, but the way it destroys them is that it overcharges a mutant's powers. Makes him practically uncontrollable, breaks him down from the inside. Pyro immolated. He accidentally burned himself to death. He just couldn't control the fire anymore.
Oh.
This is also the virus that originally killed Magic. When she was like 8.
Oh.
Yeah, when she was a child. This is what caused Colossus to lose his mind, renounce the X-Men, and become an acolyte for a period of time.
The podcast you're listening to is part of the Second Union Podcast Network. You can listen, like, and subscribe to all our podcasts by heading over to wearesecondunion.com. Thank you for listening.
But either way, as I said, Mystique's stuff didn't go well. Pyro betrayed the teammates trying to kill Senator Kelly. Mystique blows up the facility on Muir Island and fatally injures Moira McTaggart in the process. At least we believe. We find out later that's a golem. You know, Moira's safe in another place. Mm-hmm. And Mystique even shot Moira's foster daughter, Rainey Sinclair.
Sheesh.
That name mean anything to anybody?
Wolfsbane.
Sinclair?
Yeah. Wolfsbane, the new mutant Wolfsbane. She shot Wolfsbane with a prototype of Forge's neutralizer gun that took away Reign's powers. The X-Men confront Mystique, and she is wounded, and she tells the X-Men that Destiny predicted a dark future for all of mutant kind. Well, who knew? You know, Destiny didn't seem to have a real good feeling regarding mutants on a whole. But the future that Destiny foretold to her kept unfolding despite everything Mystique had been working on to prevent it. So she thinks the only way to save mutant kind at this point is to eradicate humans. Mystique is sent to the prison by the X-Men, but she escapes, and she allies herself with Martinique Jason, one of the children of Mastermind, and tries to get control of another organization called X-Corps from its founding member, Sean Cassidy, the Banshee. She's armed with a device that gives her an ability to create an electric charge, and she uses it to create an identity for herself as a new supervillain named Surge, and joins the X-Corps.
Huh.
So while Martinique Jason is showing people different illusions within the organization, Mystique Mystique brings down X-Corps from the inside and slits Banshee's throat, leaving him pretty much powerless. She's actually getting crueler as we go along.
Yeah.
After this, believe it or not, Professor X makes Mystique a secret agent.
What?
He had somebody working for him doing, like, very dark missions. And I mean, like, the kind of stuff you don't send superheroes on. He had somebody doing it for him named Prudence Layton, and she died. So when he was trying to replace her, Professor X decided the perfect person to do that was Mystique.
Of course. So
Xavier uses his powers to pretend to be Magneto, rescue Mystique from the Department of Homeland Security, and from execution from the Special Magistrate for Homo Superior Crimes, named Johnny Kitano, who's also a mutant. And Mystique claims that there's an imposter out there trying to frame her and take over the Brotherhood, and sending them on recent missions, including the assassination of Moira and the infiltration of X-Corps. She's blaming this on, I don't know, the one-armed man or something. But basically, Xavier gives Mystique a deal. Forge is her handler, and as long as she completes the missions that he sends her on without killing anyone, he will keep her away from the authorities, who pretty much have a shoot-to-kill contract on her.
Right.
So, one of Xavier's enemies that he sends Mystique up against is called the Quiet Man. This turns out to be Prudence Layton herself inhabiting the body of an assassin. And the Quiet Man contacts Mystique to give her an interference transmitter. It's a device that's supposed to keep her safe from the authorities, even if Xavier lifts his protection. So Mystique, instead of setting about to betray one person or another, she decides that the best route is to form a plan that gets her away from everybody. She pretends to try to kill Xavier while working with a thief that she met named Phantom X while still alerting Forge to stop her at the last possible moment. Her plan is to have the Quiet Man see this and believe that she attempted to kill Xavier and is still working for them. The X-Men, meanwhile, don't know that Mystique is working for Xavier, and they believe that Mystique has tried to kill Xavier, and now the X-Men are looking for
her. Oops.
Well, most of the X-Men don't find her. The one that does is the one that knows her best.
See, Wolverine?
Rogue.
No. Rogue, okay.
Rogue attacks her foster mother with a vengeance, and Mystique escapes in the most Mystique way possible. She blew up the house and jumped out a window.
Of course.
She used her shape-shifting powers to shield herself from the fall, and after this, Mystique goes directly to the Quiet Man, who's planning to have her killed at this point. Mystique manages to kill the Quiet Man, saves her former handler, and discovers that the interference transmitter that the Quiet Man had been blackmailing her with was a complete fake. So instead, she goes to steal the one that Forge has. And after some mean words between the two of them, Forge just smashes the interference transmitter, which, as you can imagine, leaves Mystique out in the cold, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
The two have this kind of goodbye kiss, and after Mystique is gone, Forge realizes that the interference transmitter he smashed was the fake one that Mystique was given by the Quiet Man. She swapped the two of them and kept the real one. So she goes silent for a very long time. Mystique does not resurface until she's discovered as a member of the X-Men. I know, you're trying to find out how she could just be discovered as an X-Man, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, just...
This was during the period where the X-Men had gone public. Everybody knew that the Xavier School was training mutants on both, scholastic activities as well as training them on the use of their powers. She disguised herself as a mutant with enhanced physical abilities named Fox, and she was a member of Gambit's training squad known as the Chevaliers. It was during this period she attempted to seduce Gambit, not because she had an interest in him, but just because she was trying to convince Rogue that this is not the man for you. She even tried to set up Rogue with a young mutant named Augustus. But, Gambit did something that I think even comic book readers at the time did not expect. He just wasn't interested in Fox. So Mystique reveals to Gambit who she is, and tells him that she's trying to relieve the tension between himself and Rogue because the two of them are unable to touch because of Rogue's powers. And Mystique changes into Rogue and offers to Gambit to be the stopgap in their physical relationship.
That's creepy and way too intrusive.
It is. I mean, I doubt she ever did this with Rogue's permission. But it's at this point that she's found out by another X-Man who's not really happy to have Mystique in the house. And that woman's name is Emma Frost.
Yeah, they have a lot of bad blood.
They do, and Emma didn't decide to confront Mystique alone. Reminder, at this point Xavier is long gone, and Cyclops and Frost are running the school together. So Frost did not confront Mystique alone. She brought the teachers with her.
Of course.
And it's at this point that Mystique says that she's been lonely and wants to be an X-Man. And because of the doubts that Rogue actually has between her and Gambit's relationship, she's willing to give Mystique the benefit of the doubt for now. The X-Men hold a vote between themselves, and it was enough that Mystique is allowed to join, but only on probationary status. And she has to, believe it or not, she has to be on Rogue's team. Rogue is running a team at this point. Except, Rogue is one of the people who voted against Mystique being an X-Man. But while she's on probationary status, Nightcrawler convinces Mystique to leave for a time being. Basically give them an adjustment period so they can get used to this idea on the provision that obviously she creates no havoc while she's gone. Mystique does not come back to the X-Men until after M-Day, the day where most mutants on the world lost their powers. She brings another mutant. She brings Augustus, the mutant known as Pulse, with her, and both were crucial in the defeat of Apocalypse not long after M-Day. So, it's at this point where Mystique is an X-Man for a period. They have a few adventures, including Rogue's team going to Rogue's childhood home in Mississippi. Mystique, for some reason, owns the house where she grew up still.
Huh.
But
Even
Rogue,
though the government destroyed her identities, seized her money and her possessions?
yes,
How does she still then own property?
I would imagine through some kind of shell or other ID. Only a guess.
Flimsy, but
Yeah.
okay.
So, while they're visiting this house, Rogue is not feeling well. She's feeling an illness, but the illness is faked, and I don't mean faked by Rogue. During this period, Mystique is working with another villain-turned-X-Man on this team, Lady Mastermind.
Oh.
And, unfortunately, there are several things that happen here. Lady Mastermind drops the illusion, so they're suddenly attacked by several other characters. The Omega Sentinel, Karima Shandapar, is an X-Men at this time, except she's possessed by the entity known as Malice. A psionic-only entity that's known to grab powerful characters and use their bodies as their own. And Mystique is the one in charge of this, because Mystique is working with the Marauders.
Okay.
I hated this story only because it seemed like Mystique was actually getting character direction, and it was suddenly undone within, 12 months. As far as comic book story time, that's not a lot of time. So, Mystique orders the Marauders to kill the X-Men. And Mystique stays with the Marauders while everyone is looking for the first mutant child to be born in the post-M-Day period. The first new mutant. This is the character that eventually becomes Hope Summers.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where things get kind of weird, because although Mystique is working with the Marauders to find this baby, I don't quite know what to do about this, but Mystique used all this as a chance to murder Mr. Sinister.
But why?
I don't entirely remember. She's at the end of the Second Coming storyline. Mystique reveals that she's been working with Gambit, who himself is a former Marauder, to murder Mr. Sinister. This is why she's doing all this. She's a double agent, but she's not telling anyone. When Sinister comes to Mystique with Rogue, who is still not feeling well and comatose, Mystique shoves Sinister's face right onto Rogue's forehead and holds him there.
Ooh.
Ooh.
And it proves fatal. But whatever is in Sinister's genome undoes the genetic damage within Rogue, and she's feeling much better. On top of which, she uses the last words of one of the last remaining Destiny diaries to heal Rogue by touching the baby's face to Rogue as well. The baby's touch purges Rogue of a virus that she's been suffering from, as well as purges all the residual psychic memories from all the power she's stolen over the years from her mind.
Interesting.
So, while Rogue is feeling better than she ever has before, she wants Mystique gone now. She's not going to pound her flat because she saved her life, but at the same time, Mystique murdered a man using her body, and at the same time risked the life of a baby to save her own, which is too much for Rogue to deal with. I think that's a fair outcome, considering everything going on here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wolverine eventually tracks Mystique down to the Middle East in Afghanistan, and apparently the recent betrayal of the X-Men by Mystique is why Logan is looking for her. He wants to kill her. Except he also has a bit of a long, complicated history with Mystique, because the two of them have been friends, lovers, betrayers, and the two fight for a while. Wolverine wounds Mystique, but denies killing her, even though she figures she's earned it at this point. Mystique is gone again for a period, except this time she turns up in the guise of Opal Tanaka. Opal Tanaka has been Bobby Drake's girlfriend since the X Factor days.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, obviously this is before the character was came out as homosexual in the comic books. And I don't think that Opal Tanaka all this time has been Mystique. I think she just took her place for a while. She eventually sets off a bomb inside of Iceman's Blackbird before shooting him and kicking him out of the plane. Then she follows Iceman to the hospital and injects him with a fatal dose of a toxin that was created by Mr. Sinister. Hospital staff try to help him, but they're held back by Mystique, while she pretty much forces him to expel the toxin from his own system. What he basically does is, you know how Iceman can transform his body to ice and back again?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He does that rapid fire and pretty much burns the toxin out of his system.
Interesting.
Then Mystique attacks Iceman in a truck and sets the truck on fire with Iceman still inside it.
I think Iceman will survive.
He does, but this is when Iceman really starts to develop his abilities to transmute. Before then, Iceman appearing as ice is pretty much a shell over a human form. It's during this mini-series that Iceman develops the actual ability to change his body into living ice.
Gotcha.
The reason... And also, Mystique impersonates Iceman, stands on top of the Golden Gate Bridge, and threatens to blow it up. This causes Iceman to come, and he's just trying to find out what in the frick is going on here. And Mystique finally explains to him that Wolverine told her during their fight in the desert that she was going to die alone. And Mystique is just... she's freaking out. The two of them yell at each other, Iceman freezes the bomb, and Mystique jumps off the bridge into the water. And Iceman goes back and tells Cyclops and Beast that he knows that this woman is not dead. And even thanks her for what she did.
I wonder how many times she's faked her own death.
Well, see, something that's kind of lacking in this background history I'm reading this from is that before Mystique showed everybody that she was working for the Marauders while she was in the X-Men, she had a romantic relationship with Bobby Drake. The two of them were dating. And the reason why she kept attacking him repeatedly was not because she hated him or was having a complete breakdown, but it's because she always sensed that Bobby never reached his full potential. He never used his powers to the utmost. She was just pushing him as hard as she could.
But isn't she old enough to be his mother?
She is, but you gotta remember, Mystique is practically ageless.
But that still means she's old.
She is. But again, you know, if you can look, there are women out in California that try to look 30 forever. She actually can.
Right, just... ew.
Hey, if you're practically ageless, anything's possible, I'm sure. Mystique pops up again, but not in a place that she's very happy to be. She's been conscripted by the head of the Department of Defense, Norman Osborn, into his own personal team of Dark X-Men. This is known as the Dark Ages in Marvel Comics, and it's not because technology suddenly went away. Norman Osborn was in charge of the government defense agencies. He changed S.H.I.E.L.D. into his own personal enforcement agency known as Hammer, and Osborn is in the Iron Patriot armor and the leader of his own version of the Avengers. The Avengers, the usual version of the Avengers are all wanted felons. And when you think about Norman Osborn and the way he perceives the world, he's not really going to be able to abide, even if he has a team of Avengers, if on the other coast there's this group of mutants who will not listen to him. So he forces Mystique to be the leader of his own version of the X-Men. He gets Emma Frost, Namor, and Cloak and Dagger to work on this team.
Huh.
Cloak and Dagger.
Yeah, and he makes sure that Mystique is going to work for him because he injects her head with nanites to keep her on a short leash. If she doesn't listen, he will detonate the nanites. And
Suicide Squad treatment, got it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is the only one he does this with. He has an agreement with Emma Frost. But, I mean, Mystique even makes this personal as she can for the X-Men, because every time she appears in public, she doesn't appear with her own face. She does it with Jean Grey's face.
Oh, that's cold.
Yeah, who at this point had been dead for quite a while.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, this version of the X-Men was undone from the interior. Now, Mystique was a member of it, but she wasn't one of the more active members of the original team of Dark X-Men. Emma Frost was in the lead. Remember, she was the co-leader of the X-Men with Cyclops, so when she appeared as one of the leading members of this Dark X-Men, that was a big deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Turns out Emma had been very honest with Cyclops from the beginning, that she had known that Osborn was seeking her out for this role. And not only did she act as a double agent for Cyclops and the X-Men against Norman Osborn, she'd already recruited Namor to follow her on this insurrection. One of the other members of this Dark X-Men was Daken, and he got the snot beat out of him by Imperious Rex. It was one of those... Remember we talked during the Jubilee dive about how Cyclops went through this mad genius phase?
Mm-hmm.
Norman Osborn was like the second person he did that to. Because not only was Emma Frost a sleeper agent along with Namor, but because of how soundly they beat Norman Osborn, Cloak and Dagger became X-Men.
Mm-hmm.
They were also members of this Dark X-Men crew. So after this, Mystique has her own stint leading the Dark X-Men, which also does not go well for Norman Osborn. And Wolverine, who had been dead for a while but returned from hell, again, comic books, figures out that Mystique was the one responsible for sending his soul to hell, so decides to get back.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, Mystique herself is shot by a hitman who calls himself Lord Deathstrike. She patches herself up and escapes on a motorcycle, and she's being chased by both Wolverine and Lord Deathstrike through San Francisco at the same time.
Wonderful.
Mystique confronts Wolverine at the end, and he stabs her with the claws and kills her. Lord Deathstrike, for some reason, collects Mystique's body and auctions it. Sells her corpse for $5 million to a particular group who's very interested in the corpse of a shape-shifting mutant. They're dressed like ninjas.
Oh, boy.
Really?
Mystique is resurrected by the Hand.
Uh...
I mean, every time I read ninjas, all I can think about is like Dragon Sound in Miami Connection these days. My interest in bad cinema is not helpful. Anyway, the Hand does resurrect Mystique, and the next time she's seen, she's in Los Angeles International Airport, pretending to be Victor Creed.
Oh, boy.
While she's dressed up as Sabretooth, she agrees to assist the Hellfire Club in trying to destroy the Jean Grey School.
So, as much as she hates Emma Frost, and as much animosity as they've had between them in the years, I find she's really closely intertwined with her.
I think there's a bit of enmity there in that while Mystique spent a large amount of her time, even as a mutant revolutionary, hiding in the shadows, somehow Emma has done a large amount of it in public.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a bit of enmity and jealousy there.
Yeah, could be.
The thing is, though, Mystique, while pretending to be Sabretooth, was pretending to be a teacher at the Hellfire Academy for the Hellfire Club. She was teaching other mutants on how to be aggressive. What we discovered, though, is that when the Hand resurrected Mystique, her powers were enhanced. She doesn't just replicate people's vision or people's looks. She can replicate their sense as well, so she can completely throw off Wolverine now.
Oh, fun.
She gets word that the original X-Men, the ones from the 60s, are in the present day. And,
right, because time travel.
Yes. Thank you, Beast.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason why she seeks out the X-Men isn't to kill them. She wants to convince a teenage Cyclops that Mystique has the best interest of all mutant kind at heart.
Oh boy, it's a trap.
Yep. She even uses Lady Mastermind and Sabretooth to commit robberies while looking like the X-Men. And it works. They steal enough money while the authorities are chasing down the teenage X-Men that she goes to Viper and buys Madripoor Island from Hydra.
Oh, wow.
Before the transaction is fully completed, the X-Men raid the place, and Lady Mastermind and Mystique are captured, but Mystique escapes in a S.H.I.E.L.D. helicopter. Iceman attacks Mystique after this point. He himself is possessed by an apocalypse fragment, evidently. And Iceman is shattered into pieces by Thor.
Ooh.
But the apocalypse fragment is left behind, and Mystique swallows it to try and inherit his abilities. While still trying to control everything on Madripoor, Mystique drugs and replaces Dazzler, who's a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent at the time. She's a mutant S.H.I.E.L.D. liaison.
Mm-hmm.
Which gives her access to S.H.I.E.L.D. as well as Dazzler's body, who she's stealing blood from to make mutant growth hormone. It's a drug that can temporarily kickstart mutant-like abilities in normal humans.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Why Dazzler though? Why would she have that?
Because Dazzler is one of those characters that fans tend to give a lot of guff, like Jubilee. And at the same time, I don't think it was necessarily because it was her, but because Dazzler had that important role as a mutant liaison in S.H.I.E.L.D. She just wanted that access, and Dazzler was, I guess you could say, kind of a happy bonus.
Mm-hmm.
So she sets up a new drug operation in Madripoor using Dazzler's blood, does it under Maria Hill's nose since she's hiding as Dazzler in S.H.I.E.L.D., and even offers Magneto a place in her new version of the Brotherhood after he leaves the X-Men. He rejects it because he's not interested in drug money from mutant growth hormone, attacks her, and beats her Brotherhood. Even stole her helicopter in order to find his own new place in the world.
Wow, rude.
It's kind of spiteful since he really doesn't need a helicopter to fly.
Yeah, don't mess with the OG when he's upset.
Right, he'll just be petty.
Yep. After this point, Mystique appears as a member of Magneto's supervillain group during a fight against the Red Skull's Onslaught form. There was a period in the Uncanny Avengers where the Red Skull, or at least a clone of him, had gotten to Xavier's body after he died. I don't remember which death this was particularly.
It happened after the fragmenting of the Phoenix.
Thank you. Yes, it was Cyclops who accidentally killed Xavier. That's right. Anyway, Xavier, or the Red Skull, stole Xavier's body, exhumed his brain, and cut out the section that was responsible for Xavier's telepathic powers and had that grafted into his own brain.
Ew.
Yeah.
And because of the nefarious use of Xavier's powers that created Onslaught, it turns out the nefarious use of Xavier's powers by the Red Skull created a Red Skull version called the Red Onslaught. Several heroes, including Doctor Strange and the Scarlet Witch, banded together with an idea to stop the Onslaught with as little destruction as possible, was to create a field that would change the alignment of good and evil in the Red Skull's mind. And it worked. Unfortunately, the spell was too powerful because it created an area effect. All the heroes within this window suddenly turned evil, and all the villains in this window suddenly turned good.
Thus, we get Superior Iron Man.
Yes, we get characters like Superior Iron Man, a nefarious Iron Man. We get like the flipped version of Havoc, which is just malevolent and weird. This is also where we get the Zen Deadpool and the heroic versions of Mystique and Sabretooth.
Neat.
After the end of this event, when most characters' alignments are put back, there's only 3 that are accidentally shielded from the effect: Havoc, Iron Man, and Sabretooth. I know, weird, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, this even creates a nicer version of Doctor Doom, if you can believe that. Anyway, during the final fight, Mystique briefly poses as Professor X to try to get through to a weird reborn version of Apocalypse that is now the adult clone of Apocalypse's pseudo-son, and Evan Saba-Noor, also known as Genesis. The Axis worked on him too, and he went from being a good kid to trying to be the new Apocalypse. He was also restored at the end of the Axis storyline. And Mystique has a few appearances here and there after that point, but for the most part, she's not seen in any great degree again until the Dawn of X. Which is just weird.
And how long of a time gap would that span? Like, how many years or months or whatever went between when she was seen?
I couldn't say. I believe Mystique had another turn as an X-Man, but it also turned out to be somewhat disastrous. I feel kind of weird about that because Mystique has had 2 or 3 turns where she's attempted to be an X-Man, but it seems like those are often shifted or done at a writer's convenience. It's like somebody comes up with a plan, but the next writer doesn't like the plan and just ejects it.
And I feel like they use the fact that she's a shapeshifter to have her alliances change too. Like, she's a chameleon no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
It's like she doesn't even know her own mind, because the next issue, the next series might have her, oh, well, I choose to do this today. It just seems too convenient.
I can agree with that. I think some of that has to do with the particular writers. I mean, we've known that the majority of comic book writers over the history of entertainment have been male, and sometimes they don't always understand a woman's mind. On top of which, she was created back in 1978, and the role of women in comic books has changed dramatically over the decades.
Right.
So I'm kind of worried that we're working with a history of a bunch of guys who would perceive even a villainous woman as somewhat easily psychologically damaged. You know what I mean? She's not the strong character that you would think of when you think about somebody who spent most of her life successfully hiding and even subverting most of the characters that she has relationships with.
I don't... Yeah, psychologically damage is not something I'd rather associate with the character of...
Neither would I, but you gotta admit, based on what we've just gone through, that is a large amount of her history. Her decisions are very much informed by whichever psychological trauma was most recent. You know, and it wasn't... She wasn't even she's like Sabretooth. She didn't start as a mutant villain. She eventually became one because somebody had an idea to make her one. And I'm not saying that was bad, but it's just one of those cases where the writers over the years have really not really talked about what her mental trauma could cause her to do and what some simple help could have made her into.
Right.
So it's very curious to me. I almost want to say that at this point, because of the way the Dawn of X has kind of changed everything we know about the X-Men and the possibilities of the characters within, maybe now is the time to put Mystique not just in an X-Men series, but it feels like the time is good, especially with the exposure that Jennifer Lawrence had with a character in movies, to put her in charge of some kind of team. I know, it may not be the best idea, but it may be the best time to try.
That's fair.
You know, what that team is, I'm not saying it's even one of the established teams or books that we've seen or read about upcoming. Maybe it's just time to try to put her in charge of something. There's got to be a group of either mutants who aren't usually thought of as combat ready, or even a group of, like, the anti-heroes that are so common in the X-Men. Because at the very least, Mystique is one of the few characters savvy enough to make a good use of a bunch of different people and their abilities.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, here is shot in the dark and just thinking out in the field. What if they establish a Brotherhood team?
If they just called it the Brotherhood, I don't know. That would... I think you'd probably get a few long-term X-Men fans who pick that up just going, what in the heck? How could you do this? You know?
Yeah.
I mean, that wouldn't be the worst idea I've ever heard of, really. It's just...
But I was kind of looking at it, like, call it the Brotherhood, but they are like a community help team.
You know, given the resurrection machine and the 5 that the X-Men have, it would almost be cool to see a new series pop up that is just Brotherhood members working under the banner of the X-Men. I mean, you could have Blob and Avalanche and Pyro and all of them back under one banner and just see what happens when they try to work for a purpose instead of just for the money.
Yeah.
Right.
That would actually be an interesting series. I mean, you could pull from different members of the Brotherhood throughout various eras. I mean, you could even pull Toad into that.
Oh, yeah, easy.
Yeah, I'd read it.
I would at least check out the first few issues just to find out what this story is.
I just like the idea of subverting what they were and seeing how that just plays out.
You know, actually, it would be a good time for that story, especially now that we know that Moira McTaggart has a very firm no precogs rule when it comes to resurrection, so Destiny cannot come back. Sooner or later, that story has to come to a head. Mystique will not let that go. So, I agree. There's a story to be told here, and it's probably time to make use of this character. It's just trying to nail down exactly where is difficult. Mystique is like Magneto. I'm sure that in the end she doesn't have malevolence in mind, but she's done enough bad things over the years that nobody's going to trust her at her word.
I've always imagined Mystique as a person who is very out for herself.
Largely, yeah, and her history does lean itself towards that. But as we've read, she does try to do the right things, except she has no ethical code. If it involves putting a baby in danger or possibly nearly killing someone, this is her version of, air quotes, help. So, I'm sure there's a story here, but it'll take smarter people than me to figure out what it is. How about y'all? You feel like you learned something?
Yeah, a lot.
I learned a few bits here and there, but I've always known I've had a basic rundown of Mystique's history and the fact that she has so many children, and hell, we didn't even name one that. There's one that wasn't even mentioned in this whole talk.
You know, there's actually another story that she could lend herself to in this Dawn of X era. That would be kind of interesting. If the X-Men had something akin to their own police force, and I don't mean superheroes, I mean somebody who has to investigate and find out more about mutant-related crimes. I mean, if you could borrow from X-Men all over the island to make that work. I mean, I'm almost amazed that Mystique isn't in X-Force just because of her ability to gather and manipulate information, for crying out loud. But I mean,
that's fair.
But if you teamed up Mystique with a bunch of other known mutant, hunters and gatherers like Bishop, Caliban, and Warpath, and a couple others, that would be a very interesting Black Ops style story.
I'm surprised she's not working with the Hellfire company.
I don't think she'd ever work for Shaw ever. and plus that also involves Emma Frost. I think that's also a no-go.
Yeah, and the way the Marauders are going, I don't think she'll fit well in that squad either.
No, actually, there's almost another story to be had here. Considering she helped kidnap Dazzler and drain her blood to make mutant growth hormone, I'm wondering if there's a confrontation that needs to be had.
Oof.
Oof. So many questions, but we've gone on for over an hour here, and we need to let this go.
This podcast is part of the Second Union Podcast Network. You can listen, like, and subscribe to all our podcasts by heading over to wearesecondunion.com. Thank you for listening.
Any characters you want to discuss next time, or any storylines that you might want to know about?
I'm still on the idea of going for Quicksilver, seeing how he's kind of got a mixed bag history as well.
Yeah, that'd be all right.
Okay. So next week we'll do Quicksilver. After that, we should do another storyline, though.
Sure.
Okay.
And actually, I have a storyline I'd like to talk about. One that's probably not very well known even by most long-term X-Men fans.
What's that?
Sure.
Inferno.
Oh.
That was a time.
I heard of that one.
That was a time when portals were open to Limbo and hell literally came to Earth. And I think it's one of those stories we need to learn about, especially since, remember, during the Dawn of X, one of the weird clues that Sinister laid out, he said an important word that everyone needs to know about is Inferno.
So gotcha.
This is going to come back around at some point. I just don't know when, so it's probably better we get ahead of it.
Cool. Sounds good.
All right. So next week it'll be all about Quicksilver. Thanks very much for tuning in. I hope everybody listening feels like they've learned something else about the X-Men they didn't know before. But next week we're going to get into one of Magneto's sons, Quicksilver. Well, actually, the only son. Used to be son. Darn retcons. But anyway, thank you. I am Jeremy.
I'm Joanna.
I'm Jesse.
And you have just been expertly informed.